So this past month has really been the month of piano competitions. We had the Chopin competition, we have the Queen Elizabeth competition, but if there's one competition that I love more than any other, it is, without a doubt, the Van Cliburn. The main reason that I really love the Cliburn is because it is by far the competition that gives the competitors the most freedom in repertoire selection. And so last week I saw the listing of the competitors and their repertoire, and for some reason decided to put together a spreadsheet of all the repertoire that all the competitors are playing. And then I decided to revive this dead YouTube channel that I've kept for a couple of years, because why not reap the rewards of my nerding out in private and talk about it to the public. And now a little bit about me and my experience with the Cliburn. I really started getting into the Cliburn in 2009, but the one that I know the most is the one in 2013, where I bought the complete tickets to go see it live in Fort Worth. The tickets themselves are very affordable. If you have to travel there, like obviously there are extra expenses that come with that, but you should highly consider just doing the entire competition. Nothing compares to listening to these competitors live. Cliburn has always been ahead of the curve when it comes to putting their competition online and doing the broadcasting and the advertising. It's always been very impressive to see, but there's nothing compared to going there live. And then the most recent one in 2022, I think, because of the lockdown, they had to do it a year later. I did not pay attention to that one as much. I think during the COVID period, I was not in the mood to go neck deep into the Cliburn. I was busy collecting other things, like the things that you see behind me. And speaking of board games, let's talk about the gamification of repertoire selection in piano competitions. So again, the Cliburn is fantastic because other than a few of the concertos and the commission work, your repertoire selection is completely free, up to the competitor's choice. However, there are still tried and true pieces that definitely should be within your consideration if you want to compete in a competition of this caliber. So here's where I'm going to nerd out about board games a little bit. There's a very popular game in the hobby called Just One, and it's actually not one that I care for a whole lot, but the rules of Just One are very simple. You have a guesser who has to close their eyes. Everyone else needs to write one word that is trying to clue in to a word that the guesser needs to guess. However, before the guesser opens their eyes, all the other players have to check if anybody gave matching clues. Any matching clues do not get shown to the guesser. And so piano competition selection is kind of like a glorified game of Just One, where you don't really want to overlap with other people. But of course, if you have a really, really bold and incredible interpretation, then maybe running into the same repertoire in the same competition can be to your advantage. And this is important to know, especially when dealing with the concertos. You're going to see a lot of repeats, but only 6 people will advance to the final round and perform their 2 concertos. 12 people will get to perform the Mozart concerto round, which is the semifinals. Spoilers, there's going to be a lot of Prokofiev's second concerto, but the chances of all 6 competitors in the finalists being ones that play Prokofiev aren't really that high. Quick disclaimer, before we go on with this video, I should let you know that if you came here to listen to agreeable, tepid milquetoast tastes in repertoire, then you might as well click elsewhere. Because if there's one thing about me that you should know is that I am a man of hot takes. And some of them, well, they shouldn't offend you, but they may make you raise your eyebrows significantly. However, I also think that it is entirely human to have hot takes. I just happen to have more of them than the average person. Now, I have a pretty solid knowledge of repertoire, but sadly for this, I was not able to listen to all the pieces that I was unfamiliar with. All right, let's begin. So we have Adas, 3 Mazurkas, Opus 27. Actually, Thomas Adas is such an interesting case for a modern composer because I feel like he's making waves in the opera world, the orchestral world, the chamber music world. He even has a Beethoven cycle that he conducted with a chamber orchestra. So that's really great on him. As you can see, there are 2 competitors that chose 2 pieces by him. I have listened to the 3 Mazurkas, I think probably 5 or 10 years ago, and I did think they were pretty interesting. A lot of polymeters, tuplets, you know, like the quintuplets versus septuplets at the same time sort of thing. So definitely a neat program choice. Darkness visible, I'm just gonna do English when there's ever a doubt. But with this work, I'm not familiar with it, but with the title so evocative, and given that Ades is the composer, I'm sure it will be a really effective piece. Now we have the Sonata number 2 by Basovich, I think. I'm actually more familiar with the Violin Sonata, the Sonata for Violin Solo by Basovich. Her approach with composition is a bit more abstract, but I think this type of repertoire is really welcome. And with that, we get into our first juggernaut composer. And who else could it be but Johann Sebastian Bach? And the first piece is actually one that I am quite familiar with. Many people have never heard of this before. It is the Aria Variata. That's right. Bach has a set of variations that are not as long as the Goldberg, and it fits sort of the Baroque slot. If you want to put a Baroque slot and you don't really want to do like a full suite, you want to do something a little shorter, the Aria Variata is a great choice. I do think the Rameau, Gavotte, and Six Doubles, that's been very popular at the dawn of Bruce Liu's album, that's probably a more effective piece, especially because the Aria Variata, most of the variations are in 2 parts only. So each hand only has to worry about one part. There's not as much like counterpoint in terms of like the 3-part, the 4-part, you know, that kind of thing. But the variations do cover a lot of character, and there's a lot of room for interpretation. So you can play the theme in a way that is a bit more chorale-like, and then once the, you know, the 2-part texture comes in, make it a bit more virtuosic and like crackly. So I see some potential with programming this piece here. Okay, Capriccio on the Departure of a Beloved Brother. Sadly, not one I'm super familiar with. It seems like the piece would be very emotional. You know, it's a very personal piece for Bach. Kind of an earlier work, I think. B-flat major. It's interesting that 2 people programmed it. That's always very cool to see. Maybe an intentional counter-programming to, say, a French suite. Speaking of French suite, we have the French suite number 3. That's the one in B minor. I've dabbled with it. I don't think I ever finished learning that one. The French suites are generally simpler, technically, but if someone could nail that style, the piece could also be very effective without taking up too much of your recital time during the round. Speaking of B minor, we have the Overture in a French style. Definitely a larger piece. It's always interesting to see how competitors deal with the repeats and whether they choose to ornament the repeats. I remember when Sean Chen in 2013 in the first round played the French Suite number 5 in G major. He did these crazy ornaments that like were really, really shocking. At that point, when I was sitting there, I'm like, oh my goodness, this guy is absolutely wild. But yeah, if you take all the repeats in the overture to the French style, I think that would be a pretty significant portion of your round. So you definitely want to omit a few of them. Partita number 5, that is a cool piece. I think I know the first movement. I think the Gigue is one that deals with hemiolas maybe. Very cool. It's a Bach piece that evokes Scarlatti more in a way. And now we have the toccatas. There's always a few toccatas in the Cliburn competition, which is fun because I don't often see them programmed in like the recitals of actual like touring musicians. But I guess these are, again, very good showcases. They're kind of like suites with maximum amount of contrast, but all within like a one movement sort of framework. So the C minor is without a doubt the most repetitive one. Personally, I find the work a little too repetitive for my taste. It's very hard to create contrast when that dun 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 just repeats over and over again. But if you play with enough drive and determination, I think the piece can be a very effective one. The D major is a fantastic piece. I recently got into a bit of a Schnabel deep dive, and he has a pretty fine performance of the toccata in D major, so I got to revisit that one. That's a really, really fantastic piece, and I'm glad there are two people playing it. That's really nice. The F sharp I'm not as familiar with. The G minor I'm not as familiar with. No E minor, but I know the E minor has this reputation of being like a piece for like younger students. I feel like I always see the E minor being programmed that way. But F sharp and G minor, you know, those minor keys, Bach is really good at writing in them, and I think there's a lot of room for expression. Okay, now we have the Well-Tempered Clavier, Book 2, B flat minor. I'm not familiar with that one. I know Book 1 B flat minor has like the 5-voice fugue, you know, really ambitious. I'm not too familiar with the Book 2. And the Book 2 G sharp minor, now that is gorgeous. The fugue has an extremely haunting a theme, 3 voices, I think. And of course, with lyrical Bach, there's lots of room for like pedaling. Like, how do you want to pedal it? How much legato do you employ in them? Do you play the whole piece piano, or do you add some forte moments as well? Recently, I've realized that you don't really need to always play expressive Bach pieces in like a piano dynamic. You can actually project more, and sometimes it sounds maybe a bit closer to a harpsichord, and that could be Bach's intentions. We don't know. He didn't write it for a modern piano, so I think pianists should be bolder when interpreting Bach. So we're done with the Bach proper. Now we're dealing with Bach Busoni, and there's a surprising number of Bach Busoni pieces. We have the chaconne, and here's where I am a little bit embarrassed. I'm currently actually working on the Brahms version, the left-hand arrangement of Bach's chaconne. However, even though I know this Busoni arrangement is like a famous piece in the repertoire, somehow I've just never been in a situation where I heard it from beginning to end. But someday I will have an opinion on this piece. Right now, I am not qualified to have one. And then we have Bach Busoni, the Num Com. There's a longer title. This is a chorale prelude. This is the one that Horowitz is known to start his recitals with. I find this one to be a hard one to catch the listener's attention. Of course, the jury knows this piece, I'm sure. I would have loved to see a different chorale prelude, because Busoni arranged so many of them. Do one that's much more symphonic, you know. But I know the Num Com is like significant in terms of the repertoire and historically. And then we have an organ prelude and fugue in D major. I am not familiar with this one, but an organ transcription is usually going to be pretty fire, so this is very exciting. And then we have the Mira Hess arrangement of Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring. I see why this is an effective piece. This is not my kind of piece to include in like a competition rep, but of course there's the famous Yal Son performance where in the final round recital, she opens with the Petri arrangement of Sheep May Safely Graze, and I think the Hess piece is equally effective that way, if that's how you want to start a recital. And I think this is an opening piece for a competitor. All right, now we have the Bach Rachmaninoff transcription of the violin partita in E major. Now, this is, for me, a baffling choice. I'm not a big fan of Rachmaninoff's arrangements in general. I'm glad that nobody programmed the Liebeslied or the Liebesfreude that Rachmaninoff did, although I do think that those would still be better choices than this violin partita over here. Just me. But then we have the Bach Zelote B minor prelude. Now this is one that I'm going to look forward to hearing, just because of how gorgeous the piece is. I still don't know if it's going to give you the extra push as a competitor by choosing this piece, but of course, Vadim Kolodenko opened his first recital, I think, or his second one, I'm not really sure, with this prelude, and he ended up winning. Now, we have one Islame by Barakirev, which is, you know, a very risky piece to play. I'm surprised not as many people program it these days. And I'm of the opinion that it is still more difficult than Scarbo, especially with the way that piano technique has evolved. I think, you know, any pianist can whip out a Scarbo. Islame is going to break some knuckles. Okay, now this is a very, very interesting phenomenon. We have 4 people programming the Barber Sonata. Now, I think this is interesting because I do recall a couple of individual performances of the Barber Sonata from previous Cliburns becoming like pretty popular videos on YouTube. I think there's a guy named Stephen Boyce. He did a Barber Sonata, and that performance of the fugue I remember listening to many, many times. But 4 Barber Sonatas is very interesting. I think the fugue is definitely the most effective movement. The first movement, there's also a lot of room for interpretation. I think if you can create an interesting contrast between the 2 tempos, sort of tonal areas, atonal area, am I right? That would be really nice. But the scherzo and the slow movement, I see them kind of just playing themselves. But you know, you gotta have larger works, and so I see why the Barber Sonata is so effective. However, I do feel like come the next Cliburn, like there's not going to be a single Barber Sonata. I would have loved to see somebody program the Nocturne. I think that's a really cool little piece. Recently, I just heard someone play the Tango Hesitation, and that was a really, really neat piece. I know it's from a longer work, Souvenirs, or is that the forehand one? Okay, now we're in Bartok land. 2 competitors performing the 3 etudes. Now these 3 etudes are like the hardest things ever written. So anytime somebody programs it, it's like a big event. Kudos to the 2 of them and all the people in the world playing these pieces, because wow, that is a tall order. And then we come to my favorite work by Bartok for solo piano, and that is the Out of Doors suite. More out of doors, please. I would love to have one year where there are 4 people just playing out of doors, because when it comes to just the sheer amount of contrast and the amount of creativity you can put inside this work, it is just phenomenal. You hear the movement with all the crickets and the insects. Each competitor can be playing it in a totally different way. And you have the little musette and all those other pieces, the more extroverted and bangy ones. This is a piece that should become even more of a competition staple, and I still don't think I would be tired of it. It also has a better ending than Petrushka, just saying. All right, we have one competitor playing Bartok's Piano Concerto No. 2. I've heard this piece live. I know it is probably the most difficult piano concerto ever written. I've never quite gotten the piece, similar to how I never quite gotten the second violin concerto, but what's weird is that the second piano concerto is a lot more tonal, at least based on my impression of it, and yet something about the structure I couldn't quite grapple with. But if this competitor advances to the finals, I look forward to hearing them. And then 3 Bartok sonatas. Okay, hot take time. Bartok sonata, it's fine. Within each movement, you can't create that much contrast. Like in the first movement, the way the movement starts and you're dealing with those like leapy octaves, like sure, you can play all the notes accurately and that's very impressive, but like how much can you actually mold the texture to sound like, oh, this is played in a way that I've never heard before? I don't think there's that much room to do that in this piece to warrant like 3 people playing it in the Cliburn and also tons of people programming it for like the various competitions around the country and around the world. Again, more out of doors, please. All right, now moving on to Beethoven, we have all the piano concertos first. This is so exciting. We have 2 Piano Concerto No. 1s, which I have such a soft spot for. Love it. And it's always fun to see which cadenzas people choose. There's the one cadenza that's like about as long as Prokofiev's second concerto cadenza. That could be a fun pairing if your final round concertos are Beethoven 1 and Prokofiev 2, and you choose the longest cadenzas for both of them. I'm glad nobody picked No. 2. I do think that technically and musically, No. 2 is by far the most inferior out of the 5 Beethoven concertos. You could do a good job of it. It also has a really weird cadenza, but the current configuration makes a lot of sense. Beethoven 3, how could you do without it? There are 5 of them. The thing with Beethoven 3 is, in my opinion, everybody plays the first movement too slow. Like, I've always found this piece to be a bit limp, a bit indulgent, which is very funny because compared to The Emperor, it is not indulgent at all. But after I encountered the recording by Fazil Say, I can never listen to the first movement played by anybody else because Fazil Say's tempo is just so spot on in my opinion. Again, crazy hot take, but let's move on. Piano Concerto No. 4. I am so glad there are 5 competitors playing Piano Concerto No. 4. Obviously, an incredibly spiritual piece with an amazing second movement, the dialogue between the piano and the orchestra. And like the first movement is also like, you can play it more romantically, you can play it more indulgently, or you can play it in a more classical way and let the sparkle or the Mozartian aspects of the piece come out. It's such a cool piece to be able to hear multiple of. And I hope that we get at least 2 in the final round. And wow, 4 Emperor concertos. I wonder if this is signaling a return of the Emperor concerto into the piano competition rep. Again, because the Cliburn is my favorite competition, I don't get to hear a lot of other competitions just because I'd much rather be practicing my own stuff. But maybe the Emperor Concerto is being played everywhere and I just don't know it, but it's very cool to see 4 of them. I feel like the third concerto was definitely the hot piece, like in 2022 and even before that. All right, now we deal with the sonatas. The earliest sonata that we get is number 16. Here I go again. This is not a piece that I enjoy very much. I don't know by programming this piece why it would be more advantageous to you than any other piece. I get that a lot of students are learning this one. Actually, no, I don't get that at all. Like any of the Opus 2 sonatas or Opus 7 could be way more effective than what this sonata expresses here. And then you have that second movement, which is borderline parodying an Italian aria. Like, do you play it seriously, or do you play it so ridiculously that it's a total caricature of itself, right? Doing either one could be against the jury member's taste, because everybody has a different opinion of this. And the finale, it's another one of those like fine finales. I don't know. I could have much rather used a Sonata Quasi un Fantasia number 13 or the Opus 26 Sonata number 12. I mean, any of the earlier sonatas could have been a great choice. The Pastoral, for example. Now, Sonata number 18, nicknamed The Hunt or whatever, or as Bernstein calls it, the Please Sonata, because he thinks that opening chord is describing the word please. Yeah, it's a great piece, 4 movements long. The second movement, Scherzo, is so much fun to listen to. The first movement has a lot of room for interpretation. And if the fourth movement is played with enough gusto, it could be kind of a barn burner. And here's a crazy thing, no Waldstein this year. Wow, see, this is what I'm talking about with that board game where like 2 people can't choose the same word. This is somehow the year where everyone knew not to choose the Waldstein, and then as a result, nobody chose the Waldstein. One Appassionata, this is the case where like one person chose it and they ended up having the upper hand because it's the only Appassionata we're going to get. Now with the Appassionata, there's one big interesting thing, which is like whether they do the big repeats in the third movement. Very interesting to see what happens. And then we have Sonata number 24, a la Therese. This is not a competition piece for me. Especially you get this one and nobody chose Les Adieux, which I'm actually not a big fan of Les Adieux, but for a competition, I think Les Adieux is a great piece to show off what you can do on the piano. Whereas number 24, the second movement is technically tricky. You could do a very effective version of that, but it's just so short. Like, why would you program this over, say, the 32 variations in C minor? Okay, and now we move on to the late sonatas, and this is also an interesting year because we don't have any Opus 101s, we don't have any Opus 109s, and we don't have any Opus 110s. But instead, we have 2 hammer claviers. Wow, that's crazy. Now, the hammer clavier is a piece where, depending on your tempi, especially of the adagio, you could potentially fit a lot more other pieces in your recital, or you can have the hammer clavier be the entire recital. But yeah, looking forward to those fugues. And then finally, Opus 111, we have 3 of them. That makes a lot of sense. And then, okay, we have Brahms. Wow, Fantasies, Opus 116. For me, if there's ever one set of late Brahms works that is not meant to be performed together, it is this one. Even though it's thematically very unified, I think going through all 7 movements of this is very, very taxing for the audience and probably for the performer as well. That E major movement is really gorgeous, but I would much rather just play that movement by itself. How nice. Oh, speaking of playing movements by itself, well, let's talk about the Handel variations first and then we'll get to that. But yeah, Handel variations. Wow, there's only one. Why is there only one? I don't know. Why are there no Beethoven Eroica variations? I don't know. The Handel variations form one of the most effective works, I think, for any recital or competition. And so I've always wanted more representation of this piece. I feel like it's a piece that is very much in the zeitgeist, everyone knows it, but it actually doesn't get played all that frequently. It's not extremely long. It's about as long as like a longer Beethoven sonata. And then we have Opus 117. Playing all 3 intermezzi in a competition is probably too much like, mid-tempo, slow tempo thing. One competitor is playing Opus 117 number 2. Great, love that, fantastic. Opus 118, one competitor is only playing number 2, the intermezzo. I'm not sure about that. This is such like, almost like a corny piece. If you're doing Opus 118, I think you just got to do all of it, really. Or you just do the first 3 movements, or not just number 2. That's the equivalent of like just programming Liebestrom, for like the Cliburn. You just don't do that. There is one other competitor who is playing the complete set, and looking forward to that one. Now, one competitor is playing 4 movements from Opus 76. I've actually played Opus 76 before. This is an interesting choice. We have number 4, which is like this B-flat piece that's like kind of just in the nebulous, like dominant region. Number 5 is very effective, kind of reminds me of Chopin's Third Ballade in some parts. 7 is very innig. very quiet. And then 8 is a cool ending that somehow everyone plays really slow because there are a lot of notes. I would have loved to hear the Hungarian one, number 2, or number 1 even. Looking forward to what this competitor has to offer here. One competitor playing just Paganini Book 2. I think with the Paganini variations, just one book is always the way to go. I don't think anybody should program both books, although a recital of Brahms' Handel and then both books of the Paganini could be pretty fire. Never mind, I stand corrected on what I just said. Now we come to the Brahms concertos, and this is very cool. We have 2 first concertos. Love it. Love the first concerto. It isn't as expressively rich as, say, Rock 3 or Prokofiev 2nd, or even Prokofiev 3rd, but it's such a piece to sink your teeth into that I just always love to see it. Piano Concerto number 2, though, does have a lot more range. I feel like it's a lot more dynamic. Even in the first few pages, you can do so much, and it can really show the judges and people who are tuning into just the finals, like what you are about as a performer. So seeing 3 of them, if all 3 of them get to the finals, it might be a little bit too much Brahms 2, but we hope at least one of them gets through, right? We have Brahms Scherzo Opus 4. This is also a work that, believe it or not, I have played. I know, this is not a familiar work by any means. It is a piece in E flat minor, and it is really, really a banger piece. It's very much like if Brahms ever wrote a Chopin Scherzo. About 10-minute long piece. It has like 2 trio sections, so in that case, it's a bit more Schumann-esque. Imagine the first movement of the Fasching-Schwank. Super great piece. Love seeing it here. And then we have the Sonata number 3. Now, I'm surprised that there aren't as many Brahms sonatas. My favorite is the second one, although I think getting a great performance of the second one is very hard. The thing with early Brahms is you don't want to get too indulgent with them. You want to have that sort of youthful energy. I know there's this saying that Brahms never had a childhood. That is not true. Brahms was a young man, and he had a lot of vitality in his writing. And the first 3 sonatas should be approached in a young man sort of fashion. So, Sonata number 3, very cool. Probably as long as the Hammerklavier. So, a tricky piece to program in your recital. That's why I would have loved to hear some number 1s and number 2s. Now, we have Busoni, Berceuse, Elegiac. With anything by Busoni, especially with such an epic title, this piece could be like a 7-minute long thing, could be like a 3-minute long thing. I'm not really sure, but we love seeing Busoni because Busoni has a lot of great shorter piano pieces. There's one that sounds like Greensleeves. That's a fantastic piece. All right, we have a piece called Ba Ban by Chen. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. I'm even trying to translate it to Chinese, and I still don't know what Ba Ban could possibly mean. So I'm going to go in fresh, I think. And then Unsuk Chin, Etude number 2. I'm familiar with the one. She has one that's in the key of C, right? Chin is kind of like Basovich, a little hard for me to get into, but I really, really look forward to hearing it. I think in the right context within a competition round, pieces like this could really, really hit. Okay. Chopin 24 Preludes. I'm glad there aren't a tremendous number of these programmed because I'm somebody who does not enjoy the experience of listening to all 24 preludes. I know there are things unifying all of them, and it's such a testament to Chopin's writing, but from an enjoyment perspective, I would have much preferred something like this one competitor playing 7, 8, 11, 19 through 24. That's already quite a few, but I'm glad that there's somebody who is willing to do something like that. And ending on number 24 is fantastic. There's number 19, the one with the E flat one that's really hard. Yeah, so you do the E flat all the way up to the D minor. And you have the F sharp minor one in there as well. So fantastic. And the other competitor who chose all of it, you lucked out being the only one to play it. I think it's going to work in your favor. We have the 3 mazurkas, Opus 63. I'm not as familiar with these. I think the first one's in B major, or one of them is in B major. But Chopin mazurkas are absolutely fantastic, and I look forward to hearing them. Second Ballade. This piece very much works if the pieces around it are more extroverted, because even though there are a lot of technical sections in the middle, there's also a long stretch of just quietude, right? Pastoral, sort of. And then it gets very sinister in the middle and in the end. But a great piece to see here. Now, here's the thing. I think overall, this year for Chopin is very interesting because I think everyone knows that the Chopin competition is going on around the same time. So generally, I got the vibe that people are less prone to picking Chopin, and I think that's very clever. But with the given number of Chopin that we see here, especially again, with effective programming around the other pieces, there can still be some highlights of the competition that are Chopin. Ballade number 3, an interesting choice. I'm not sure. I think the ballade number 2, all of the other 3 ballades are more effective here. It's a great piece. I mean, like in a recital, I would probably love to hear this ballade over any other ballade, but in a competition, I'm not super sure about this one. No ballade number 4s, very interesting. No ballade number 1s, that's to be expected in this day. That's like a piece that's been chosen so much that to program it in a competition is riskier than not programming it. 2 barcarolles, we love to see it. The barcarolle is an interesting piece because for me, the moment you hear the first minute, you kind of know what the competitor is about. And so you can enjoy the rest of it maybe, or you're just gonna be suffering for the next like 8.5 minutes. So not a piece that I would pick just because I want a piece with more variety, but it's great that it's here. I mean, it's one of the greatest piano pieces ever written. Etudes Opus 10, interesting. One person is only playing number 3, which is the Farewell, and number 8, which is the Sunshine. Interesting that nobody pulled the Nobuyuki Tsuji and played all 12 of them. I know the Opus 10 etudes are way harder to play in a row than the Opus 25. Well, actually, are they? I don't know. I've never done it, obviously. But Opus 25 does have that horrifying, the last 3, which is like Tendinitis Town, basically. But we do have 2 competitors playing the entirety of Etudes Opus 25. Very, very impressive. I guess texturally and mood-wise, this is definitely the more stormy set, but you still get moments of levity. Butterfly, the third one, the Gallop. And there's one competitor that's only playing number 1, Aeolian Harp, and then 6, which is the double thirds, and 7, which is the cello etude. That's, hey, I think that is actually kind of a banger set. Putting the 2 slower ones in the outside and then the very difficult one on the inside. That's really neat. Ooh, I really like that. Impromptu number 2, fantastic piece. I don't know why somebody would program this. I think Impromptu number 3 is an incredibly subtle work that needs more representation in these things. Impromptu number 2 is gorgeous. It's like an absolutely fabulous piece. I guess you do have that last page where it just sort of disintegrates into 30-second notes. I see it. I'm interested. Context matters, and I don't have it here. So Nocturne Opus 62 number 2, excellent piece. If one plays it too indulgently, the middle section can feel a little endless. But if it does pick up a little in the middle, this piece could be really, really effective and moving. We have 3 Chopin Piano Concerto number 2s. I like the second piano concerto, especially in the Cliburn scenario when there's the 2 concertos you can choose from. One of the sections, they like give you selection to choose from, such as all 5 Beethoven, Chopin Piano Concerto number 1 and 2, and a couple of other ones. In that case, the Chopin second concerto is a really, really great one. And you get to see the string section do Collegno, which is always fun. Meanwhile, there are only 2 Chopin first piano concertos, which, you know, if you choose Chopin, you're obviously running into the entirety of the Chopin piano competition, but these are just tried and true pieces, and I like to hear them. We get 1 Polonaise Fantasy. Polonaise Fantasy is another piece where it could just drop dead in the water from like the first minute, or you can create one of the most fascinating and interesting performances of it ever. And the way you perform the climax in the last page could also make or break the piece. A very, very delicate work, but again, one of the greatest pieces ever written. Love to see it. This is very interesting. Somebody's playing the B-flat major Polonaise, Opus 71 number 2. Now, I think all 3 Opus 71 Polonaises are very, very fascinating works. It is tricky because of how repetitive they are. You can obviously omit the repeats for any Polonaise, but if you do all the repeats, that is going to be a little on the repetitive side. You just gotta get the phrase structure, the sentence structure right, and like have each section be like a complete sort of idea. I think even if you do take all the repeats, a work like this is really, really great to see. Scherzo number 4, very interesting, very popular these days. I know that it's a really thorny, very awkward piece. We could have some Scherzo number 2s and Scherzo number 3s, and it would be kind of nice. 1 second sonata, you gotta have it. And then the third sonata is just absolutely amazing. The third sonata is really long. I think a Brahms sonata or like a Hammerklavier would be a better choice for a competition. That hasn't stopped every competitor ever in considering this piece. And I can see why. I mean, it's, you know, very effective work. We have Clara Schumann, somebody playing the the number 5 mazurka. Now, this is very much copying. I don't want to say copying because it is a very cool idea. Imitating what Di Wu did in 2009. Basically, this mazurka forms the intro of Robert Schumann's Davidsbündler Tanz. And so this competitor is playing the number 5 mazurka with the entire Davidsbündler Tanz by Robert following it. And it's a cool idea. I really like it. Okay, we have one Clementi Sonata in F sharp. Love that piece. It's sort of like a very romantic type of a classical work. Love seeing Clementi here. Somebody should program one of the more virtuosic ones as well. I think that Clementi has a spot in piano competitions, and it's up to people to unearth that. Okay, wow. So obviously CPE and Clara, those are first names, but shorthand. This is what we're dealing with. CPE Bach, Sonata in G minor. I do not know Sonata in G minor by CPE Bach. I've actually been listening to quite a bit of CPE Bach. The early classical period, as long as early Haydn, that's been my niche recently. But I do not know the G minor H47, and I look forward to hearing it. Very cool. Especially in the minor key, CPE Bach can have a lot of the Empfindsamkeit or the Sturm und Drang. I think there's a lot of room for a different type of expression in these pieces. And then we have the Sonata in F sharp. I don't know this one. I didn't put a number here for some reason. Probably because there wasn't as much space. But Sonata in F sharp, cool. And they're interesting key. I don't know the piece, but I look forward to hearing it. Okay, we have one competitor playing Debussy Images Book 1. Both books of Images are really, really outstanding works. It deserves to be represented in a piano buffet like the Cliburn. And they both end with a fast and effective movement. Now with Pour le Piano to me, it's one of those, who is to judge these things? But for me, it's always come across as kind of a student piece. And again, if we're talking in the land of recitals, then, anyone can program Pour le Piano. I'd love it. In the sense of a competition, more so estampe, but also Pour le Piano, it definitely has that student vibe about it. And I'm not the one who makes up the rules. I'm sure there are many of you who think that as well about Pour le Piano. That toccata in the end, the whole first movement, that just has a student quality to it. I don't know why. There are 5 competitors playing Debussy preludes, and this is really, really shocking. We have no Lyle Joyeux. We don't have any masks. We don't have anyone playing the etudes, which is crazy. Why would you not play the Debussy etudes? But no, instead we have all these people playing these preludes. Let's see what we got. We have one person playing the Book 1 Serenade Interrupte, which is fine. The Terrasse de Clair de Lune, which is a great piece. Ondine is great. And of course, you got to have the fireworks piece. Feu d'artifice. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are playing Feu d'artifice. I totally get it. I totally get why that piece is the one that people choose. There's this General Levine piece. I always get it mixed up with Hommage de Pickwick. I know Pickwick better. I don't know General Levine. So sorry, I don't have any comments on that one. It's probably another one of those parody, military-esque pieces. I'm not really sure. Morandine, very good. The Vent du West, extremely effective. Great piece of music. Book 2, Ondine, Feu. And then going back to play Bruyère, which is, that's a gorgeous one. And then more General Levine. And then one competitor only playing Feu d'Artifice. I mean, look, these are all great picks. I'm glad nobody picked Cathedral, the Sunken Cathedral piece, because I think it's a great piece for a recital. But again, for a competition, it might run a little too long, given how much it really says. Defia, Fantasia Betica. This is a work that I know I have to listen to. The few times I've heard people mention it, they always say how great of a piece it is. I'm glad it's represented here. I don't know much about it, so, shame on me. Fauré Nocturne number 6. We need more Fauré. Okay, well, the pieces that really need to come back in this day and age are actually the Valse Caprices by Fauré. If people start picking up on the Valse Caprices, everyone's going to be playing them because they're so fantastic. And later on the list, we have a couple of the Valse, pastiches, the operatic pieces that are coming up. Fauré Valse Caprices, get on with that. If you can perform a Nocturne number 6 that makes sense of all the harmonies, you really get those relations down. This is a piece that can be just so effective, and I love seeing it. Franck, Prelude, Chorale, and Fugue. I have to get these right. This is the solo piano one, has the Mahler 1 theme. Dun, 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 dun. Fantastic. Love it. Great work. Glad we're only hearing it twice, because if we hear this one 5 times, we'd probably all melt into a puddle. The Frank Bauer Prelude, Fugue, and Variation. Now, this is a arrangement of the organ work. I guess it's a cool piece to play as a novelty in a recital. In fact, I do adore the way the work sounds. I don't know why you would play this one for a competition. All right, someone's playing Gershwin's 3 Preludes. This is definitely a bit of an odd choice. And I don't recall them playing it at the end of their program either. This could be a fun encore, but to play it at like the beginning or the middle of their rep, that's an interesting one. I hope it's effective. I hope I'm proven wrong. But the 3 Preludes, they're so short and they're such like pops pieces, you know, like pops side of the orchestra concert. I'd much rather see like the Gershwin songbook or some of the Earl Wild transcriptions, for example. We have Gershwin Rhapsody in Blue. So Rhapsody in Blue was listed as one of the concerto options for the final round, along with the concerto in F. My question is, why wouldn't you choose the concerto in F? Or maybe the Ravel? I forgot if the Ravel G major was on it, but I would rather choose the Ravel G major, which in itself isn't a fantastic piano concerto for a competition. I don't know, Rhapsody in Blue, I don't think it expresses a whole lot, and a lot of what it expresses is just chugga 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 jazz. Like think about the famous slow theme. Every time that slow theme is in its most like lush and gorgeous, it's all the orchestra's doing. When the piano has it, it's more of like a jazzy, like flirting with that theme a little bit. And so Rhapsody in Blue, interesting pick. I hope this competitor gets in and shows me what a final round Rhapsody in Blue sounds like. Now I have the Ginastera Sonata number 1. This is a fantastic piece. I know it sounds very reminiscent of the Carl Vine. I like the Ginastera equally as much. I just said both pronunciations of the name. So you can duke it out which one is correct. 4 movements, really muscular, also with a lot of room for like expression. Can be dance-like, can be song-like, can be whatever you want it to be. Love the piece. Okay, Gounod Liszt Valse from Faust. I know there's a finalist in 2009 that programmed it. I think it was Bojanov, but I've never heard the piece in its entirety, so might be a good one. I don't know, a lot of these like Faustian pieces by Liszt I'm not a big fan of, as we'll get to later once we talk about Liszt, because I have some hot takes coming up. All right, now we have Granados Goyescas. I'm most familiar with the first movement of Goyescas, you know, the da-da-dee-da-dee-da-da-da-dee-da. But I don't remember what that one was called. So when I look at both of these names, I'm like, I think one of them is the one I'm talking, I think it's the Amour one, but I might be wrong. I'm glad these pieces are here. They're extremely expressive, pianistically complex. Love them. I don't think there's any Albanis, is there? Wow, no Albanis. All right, we have one Grieg concerto, which is great. Pianists need to get off their high horse and start programming the Grieg and the Schumann for these like double concerto rounds, in especially the Cliburn, but other piano competitions as well. Because we love hearing the Grieg. There's a lot of stuff to do in the Grieg. There's a great cadenza in the Grieg that if you play it well, it's gonna wow the judges. Like the judges are gonna be surprised at how good this Grieg cadenza sounds, because everyone thinks they know it until they hear it again. This work just has endless amount of charm and room for surprise. All right, we have Goubaidulina Chacon. Goubaidulina Chacon, it is not a piece I particularly care about. I find the theme extremely harsh, and I don't know why the theme has to appear again near the end. In a piece like this, you hear the theme once, the variations just progress, you get to the end, things get denser. I don't think you need the theme to come back again. The Toccata Truncata, I don't know, and this could be the Goubaidulina piece for me, so I look forward to hearing this one. Now, the Handel Suite in D minor is a crazy pick. The reason this piece has been picked by somebody is mostly because it features that famous Saraband that everyone thinks is like not a real Baroque piece, but it is. It's the one that goes don, 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 and then in major, don, 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 right? I don't know what the rest of the suite sounds like. I do think even that Saraband is a little more simple, and of course, the piano version means that you can roll your chords, you can do whatever you want with it. An interesting piece that I'm looking forward to learning, and hopefully, you know, this could be one of those pieces where I'm like, you've heard the Saraband, but have you heard the rest of it? You know, maybe this will convince me of this Handel suite. And then we have the Haydn F minor variations. More people need to program this one. Like, I know it's like the novelty piece. It's like the minor Haydn piece that everyone like cherishes and worships, but we really need to actually see it in performance more. That's all I have to say about that. We have the Haydn Sonata in E major. I think I'm getting it mixed up with a couple of Scarlatti E major sonatas. I forgot how this one starts. Does it go like da da dee da dun dun and then bum 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 bum? I think it goes like that. Haydn sonatas I think have a great structure to them, especially the ones with the fast finale. If a Haydn piece has like a minuet finale, there's room to program them elsewhere, but not in competitions. This is one that has a presto finale, as is the E minor one. Now, I think the E minor one, the first movement just kind of plays itself. The second and third movements are excellent, but with that first movement, I'm not sure if this is a more superior piece to, say, the B minor sonata or even the C minor sonata. And Sonata in E flat 52, you gotta have it. It's a great piece. Definitely not one to get over familiar with because it relies on its humor so much. And of course, as an interpreter, one can overdo the humor with one performance of it in an entire competition. I can see it being the Haydn performance of the entire shebang. And then, okay, somebody's performing the Sonata in G number 6 or HOB number 6. I think this is actually Sonata number 1 by the modern listing. It's very short. Some books call it a divertimento instead of a sonata. This is one of the most baffling choices in the entire competition. I don't see why choosing this piece would do any favors to the competitor. Of course, the same competitor is performing a CP Bach sonata in the next round, which I can see some interesting parallels, but just choose a more substantial Haydn sonata if you want to do something like that. Okay, we have Haydn Sonata number 12. That one's in A major. I'm not very familiar with that one, sadly, but more Haydn is good. Again, if it has a minuet finale, I'm not so sure. But if it's one that has like the standard classical sort of structure, then why not? Hindemith Sonata number 3. There's some Hindemith I like. There's a lot of Hindemith. I find too Hindemithian. One competitor is playing the kaleidoscope movement from the character Schism. I'm sure this is a great virtuosic work. I love seeing these types of like little encores. Love to see like Mashkovsky, for example, or like the Stephen Huff arrangement of My Favorite Things. Again, Earl Wilde's arrangement of the Gershwin piece. Like these are all great pieces to add. Kapustin etudes, more Kapustin etudes, please. Janacek Sonata number 1. I'm very familiar with the opening of this. I do not know what the second movement sounds like. I think it ends slow and quietly. It seems like a popular piece. It seems like a very moody piece. And Janacek has a very like stark style. So this is fantastic. Would love to see some excerpts from On the Overgrown Path. Would love to see some In the Mists. I think those are all pretty cool pieces to include in competitions. But the Janacek Sonata, I'll take it. One competitor playing fanfares from Ligeti Etudes. Fanfares is an interesting one. Definitely hard to memorize, very tricky. I think we could use some of the other pieces. Devil's Staircase, obviously, and even ones that I'm not as familiar with. Isn't there one about like a rainbow or something? Yeah, I'd love to hear stuff like that. Fanfares, I've never been crazy about it. One performer is playing the Lily Boulanger Prelude in D flat. That is fantastic. We love Lily Boulanger. I'm familiar with the Cortège. I think I've heard the Jardine, one of the Jardines once. I don't know if I know this Prelude in D flat, but I've played the violin and piano works with my wife. Shout out. Those are some of our go-to pieces. We come to Liszt now. Oh my goodness. Wow, there's so much Liszt, as is expected. One competitor is playing the Saint Francois Walking on Water from the Legends. Great piece. Come on, it's so good. And then we have some excerpts from Année de Pèlerinage, Peril. I forgot it. Does the L come first or the R come first? I forget. I think it's Pèlerinage. Clocks Genève. I'm not familiar with it, but I mean, Liszt and clocks can't go wrong. Two competitors playing Jeu d'eau, Villa Est. That's a great piece. We will see some competitors playing Ravel's Jeu d'eau later. Weird choice. Good choice, but again, kind of a student piece. We'll get to that. But the Liszt Jeu d'eau, I mean, I'd love to hear it. 5 Dante sonatas. I mean, okay. Dante sonata, cool piece. Very virtuosic, very difficult, very Lisztian, but this is not the piece for me. And to see 5 of these programmed, I don't love it, but it's a competition. You gotta see it. I totally understand the decision. I'm just not a big Dante Sonata fan. I warned you about this. Now, when it comes to sacred Liszt music, I am a much bigger fan. Love the Funerai, love the Benediction. It is kind of a long work. It doesn't express as much as, say, Sonetto or Francois Walking on Water. Now, Mephisto Waltz, again, you gotta have it. It does approach being way too overplayed at this point. And of course, there's the personal bias. Again, it's like an evil Liszt piece, so I'm like guaranteed to not love it, which is weird because I actually really enjoy the Dante Symphony. Yeah, with these pieces, I've never been a huge fan of them. Okay, now we deal with the Liszt concertos. I think that Piano Concerto number 1 is destined to make a comeback. There should be more of them, but I definitely do not dislike seeing Liszt 2 programmed 3 times. Love Liszt 2. Liszt 1 is interesting in that it hands you everything by the first 5 minutes. Like by the end of that first movement, if you want to call it that, you know how the rest of the piece is going to go. Liszt 2, there's more progression. How it eventually gets to the end and the very end is very scherzando. It's just absolutely outstanding. And a great piece to listen to. 2 Don Juans, you gotta have it. Also risks being overplayed. Like if there were 5 Liszt Don Juans, I'm gonna say my prayers to all the competitors. But with 2, you gotta have it. It's extremely challenging, extremely effective. 1 Norma. Norma's great. Starts with these closed chords and then ends up being the most expansive, beautiful, technically demanding and impressive piece. 4 Liszt sonatas, I get it, it's too many. When you're programming something like a Liszt sonata, you have to watch out. May the best Liszt sonata win. There's this arrangement of Les Preludes by Liszt au Millet. I don't know what this is. I've actually never heard the symphonic poem Les Preludes, so I don't even know if it would be an effective piece for a piano arrangement. But I'm guessing if somebody programs it, it's probably extremely orchestral, extremely symphonic, and I look forward to hearing it. The Liszt Horowitz Hungarian Rhapsody number 15. That's the Rakowski March. Yeah, why not? Horowitz's arrangements to me are generally a little bit heavy-handed. For example, I'm not a big fan of the Carmen variations, and I'm glad nobody programmed it here because they are kind of one-dimensional in what they're expressing. I would have loved seeing like a number 12, maybe not number 2 because it's overplayed at this point. We have some Mettner representation coming up. We have 4 competitors playing Mettner with no repeats. We have 1 performer playing the Canzona Serenata number 6 from Forgotten Melodies. I don't know that movement particularly. The Forgotten Melodies, the first set, Opus 38, it opens with this pretty expansive sonata, but then the rest of the piece seems to continue building off of the sonata until it reaches like a coda that directly calls back the opening of the entire set. I think if someone were to program it, you either program the sonata or you do the entire 40-minute set. Here's the problem. I don't know this movement well enough to know if it stands out as an individual work. So maybe this is an extremely inspired pick. And now we have the second of the sonata triad. Now the sonata triads, they basically handle a sonata form movement in like a short, probably 7 to 8 minute time frame. And then we have a Night Wind. My wife, who is the violinist, shout out again, loves Mettner. And she's very familiar with this Night Wind sonata. I am not as familiar with the Night Wind Sonata, but I look forward to being familiar with the Night Wind Sonata. Sonata Tragica. A lot of the Mettner sonatas have names. I've actually learned and performed very badly the Sonata Ballade at one point last year, and I really, really enjoyed what that piece had to offer. But the Sonata Tragica, again, not super familiar with it, looking forward to it. All right, we have a Mendelssohn Piano Concerto number 1, which is one of the pieces that was listed as the concerto a requirement from the final round. Interesting pick, very virtuosic, probably a little on the shallow side in terms of what it expresses, but if your other concerto is like Prokofiev's second, this could be like a great contrasting work. I'm looking forward to the version of the final round where we have Rhapsody in Blue, Piano Concerto number 1, and like the Liszt Ravel left-hand concerto coming up. That would be so cool. Variation Sérieux. Love a piece. Lots of room for expression. I think this one should be played more in competitions, as well as those 2 Brahms variations that are part of like the Opus 11 set, especially the second one, which is based on a Hungarian theme with the time signature changes. Would love to see that one played more often. We have 2 people playing Messiaen, Vin, Regard of L'Enfant, Jésus, and we have 2 competitors playing the same movement. The Baiser. Is Baiser the Kiss? Is that the Kiss movement? It is Kiss. Oh my goodness. I just realized what this is. Yeah, the Kiss movement is so gorgeous. I don't think it's very flashy. Maybe there's a middle section that gets more flashy, but it's like borderline jazzy. It's a fantastic work. Nobody chose like the Joy one. That doesn't sound joyful at all. Gabriela Montero, the commission piece, Rock Time, being played 30 times because it's the commission piece, of course. She is the bee's knees when it comes to pianist composers. I had a chance to listen to her Latin concerto performed by her in Ottawa. Actually, I just watched a live stream of the Ottawa performance, but it was very memorable. And she did, of course, a killer improvisation as the encore that like knocked me out, just completely knocked me out. I look forward to seeing how she combines ragtime in the style of Rachmaninoff, or at least this is what the title is implying. Very, very fitting, I think, for the Cliburn competition. Now, under a lesser composer, I would be very, very worried at the title of this piece, but because it is Montero, I am super, super excited for this. All right, now we have Mozart. Yay, ooh, Adagio K540. There's no way somebody is going to do every repeat, because then the work will be like 13 minutes of Adagio, which is too much. You could probably get away with doing no repeats or just repeating the first section. It is a great piece of music. Really, really emotive, really depressing, tragic. I love this piece as much as the Rondo in A minor, which I'm surprised nobody programmed here, but you know, these are more obscure Mozart works. The Allegro K400, this is in B flat major or G minor. I think it's in G minor. I do not know this piece. I look forward to hearing it. I think it's like a sonata allegro form that doesn't have the latter two movements. Maybe a neat little piece. Fantasia K475. I definitely prefer this piece over any of the other Fantasias, especially the D minor. I don't think the D minor makes for a very compelling competition piece or even a recital piece, but that's my personal opinion. Yeah, I'd much rather hear either the Adagio, the Rondo, or this Fantasia in C minor. Oh, this is just such a gorgeous piece. The piano concerto round consists of doing a Mozart concerto. You have to select one from number 9, number 15, number 19, all the way through number 27, with the exception of the Coronation, which is number 26. If you include number 9, you might as well include like numbers 11 through 13. Some of those, the teens concertos, are actually very tricky. There's no number 17, which is also very interesting. Number 15 is a great piece, very, very demanding, very technically challenging, believe it or not, in B flat major. Kind of an interesting counterpart to number 27, whereas number 27 is a little more like, it's got that late twilight hue, you know. Number 19, I'm not sure what it is. Number 20. All right, let's talk about number 20. I get why number 20 is important. I get why everyone loves number 20. I personally have trouble with this piece. There are just so many ways for this piece to go wrong. I think the first movement overall is good, but then when the piano comes in with ostinato, it can risk sounding a little simplistic. Like, how do you make that crescendo just work enough? You have that cadenza by Beethoven, kind of confusing. You have the second movement that could easily be overdone, a little too cloying. And then you have that third movement, which ends in that major key. These are all the reasons that number 20 has never worked for me. I know I am in the vast minority, or what's the opposite of vast? The teensy-weensy minority when it comes to this piece. I understand why 4 people would choose it, but I just wish that 4 people could choose the C minor as well. That's more my jam, and it's always been neglected, but I would love to hear some C minor. We do get one. All right, number 21. Awesome, great piece. Because of the popularity of the second movement, I don't think I realized how great of a piece this was until recently, but I just love hearing it. Number 22, even better. I wish there were more than 2, but number 23 is not too shabby either. With that finale that has the Alberti dun, dun, dee, you know, the cut time, it's so good. You have that gorgeous slow movement, and the first movement is really, really great as well. I mean, it's just great. I love seeing 7 of them. It's better than seeing 7 D minors. And then we have 1 C minor. Number 25. I know this is like a very substantial piece. I'm not super familiar with it. I know it's in C major. And number 27. I think this is a strange piece for a competition. The third movement is pretty great. The first movement does risk on being a little too repetitive with the and the second movement is one of those gorgeous, I think it's a larghetto or an adagio. It's more of an interaction piece between piano and orchestra. And then there's Piano Concerto number 9, the Young, or I don't know what the nickname is. This is a cool piece. Finale kind of has like 2 movements in one, like a slower one and a faster one. It's got tunes galore. All right, now we come to the Mozart sonatas. We have a B flat 570. Is that the one that goes dee, 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 da, dee? If I recall correctly, this is a piece that has an optional violin part. I'm just not familiar enough with the piece to know whether it's an effective one or not. C major, love it. When I first saw the C major, I'm like, oh, maybe this is too much of a student piece. But then I remember like how gorgeous that slow movement is, how effective that finale is. It's a surefire hit, as is the C minor. Like this is a great, great piece. And honestly, I'm just glad we're seeing more of these pieces than the D major K311. It's getting too much. Like too many people are programming 311. And I love 311. It's a great piece. We can like spread the love for Mozart sonatas, have more breadth than like just 311. And of course, there's going to be a 576, which is definitely the most technically challenging, and I really like the musical aspects of this piece too. Second movement that actually evokes some of the 23rd Piano Concerto in its more like melancholic minor sections. We have the Mussorgsky pictures at an exhibition. All the virtuosic parts are extremely effective, but where competitors can make or break the piece are in the parts that really challenge the decay of the piano. The catacombs, you hit a chord, you know it's going to start decaying, but how do you deal with it so that it can retain attention and actually give the piece some sort of structure, right? Similar to the aux cart, like you can play it as loud as you want, dun, 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 like the notes are still going to decay compared to say an orchestral arrangement of it. 5 etudes by this composer named O-N-A-C, all capitalized, and I think there are even some inflections on some of them. I don't know who this guy is. I will look this person up afterwards. Somebody's playing 4 of them. The Monody Dance, the Carnival, the Toll, and Pent Up. That's exciting repertoire, and I hope these pieces are as good as their titles would imply them to be. Somebody's playing all 10 arrangements of Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, Opus 75. That's a lot of Romeo and Juliet, but these pieces are so gorgeous. This could be the all 12 transcendental etudes of this competition. One competitor playing Suggestions Diaboliques. It's always an effective piece, but you might as well include one of the other movements to make it a little more beefy. You'd be better off playing like Winter Wind Etude, as opposed to something that's both a student piece and a semi-effective competition piece. Whereas this work, I don't know what it is, but we have some middle era Prokofiev, number 6 scherzo from 6 pieces, Opus 52. This work I'm extremely fascinated about. I would love to hear some of this. Now we get to the Prokofiev piano concertos. Piano Concerto number 3, there are 2 of them. It makes sense. It feels like Piano Concerto number 3 is less popular than it used to be, whereas Piano Concerto number 2, there are 6 of them. This is definitely the piece of the decade. Everyone's choosing it, and I can't even blame it, because once upon a time, it was my favorite piano concerto as well. More power be to those who can play Prokofiev's Piano Concerto number 2, especially after all the other recitals and all the other rounds. Looking forward to some good ones. Sonata number 3. I don't know if Sonata number 3 is a good piece for the Cliburn. I think you gotta go multi-movement, you gotta go War Sonata. You can even do like a Piano Sonata number 9, because that's like a Twilight, late era Prokofiev. Sonata number 3, you're gonna have to do a really, really tour de force performance of this. Sonata number 7, it's overplayed, but we love to see 1 or 2 of them. Whereas Sonata number 8, we have 3 of them. That's a lot of Sonata number 8s. I can't handle too many listens of that piece in a row, but I understand why people are picking it. I think the sonata is prone to a lot of dead spots, though. I look forward to how competitors will interpret those dead spots and hopefully bring them to life. One competitor is playing 3 Vision Fugitives. I don't know these off the top of my head. 17, 14, and 16. I'm sure these will make a nice little 20th century corner of whatever other repertoire is in this round. We have 2 Rachmaninoff Corelli variations. Oh yeah, we're getting to Rachmaninoff. This is the big stuff. Corelli variations, fantastic piece of music. Love seeing 2 of them. I think one of these days somebody needs to program the Chopin variations. Just do it. If the first sonata, which we'll definitely get to, is being represented so much and it's such a big beefy work, then the Chopin variations deserve its time in the spotlight. We have the Etude Tableau Opus 39. This is a great set. You have all of the fast ones, you have all of the slow ones, you have all of the mid-tempo, don, 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 don. This is another one where I'm glad there aren't like 6 competitors playing all of these, but one being able to program all of them, love it. So now we get to the moment musical, and we have one competitor playing selections. Aren't you supposed to announce what pieces you're playing beforehand? If a competitor can announce selections, then what's stopping them from deciding what piece to play at the very last minute? I'm hoping the competitor has already picked exactly which ones they're going to be playing, so there isn't that unfair advantage. All right, one competitor is playing just the elegy from the Morceau Opus 3. I don't know why that is an effective piece over any other Rachmaninoff work. Also, Polichinella is a classic like Suggestion Diabolique situation. Like when you're playing just that piece, it risks seeming a little student-esque. However, if somebody could program the elegy and the Polichinelle together, now that would be a very nice representation of that early Rachmaninoff. Maybe cap it off with the Prelude in C-sharp minor. Now we're talking real rep selection. All right, now we get to the concertos. 2 Rachmaninoff second concertos. I get it. I think Rock 2 at this point is a less effective piece than Tchaikovsky's first or Rock 3, just because expressively speaking, it is kind of limiting. You know, you're in that big post-depression Rachmaninoff. All 3 movements kind of have the same sort of sound world. Like when they get lyrical, they kind of sound similar. You might as well be picking Rock 3. And of course, we have 6 of them. You can't avoid it, and I'm here for it. Proc 2, Rock 3, bring them on. Love it. One competitor's only playing numbers 5 and 12 of the Opus 32 preludes. I think number 5 is the B minor and number 12 is the G sharp minor. That's a nice set. Rachmaninoff, Rhapsody on a theme of Paganini. We need more of this. More Rhapsodies on a theme of Paganini, please. I mean, of course, there's the curse because there was a competitor in the Tchaikovsky competition who programmed 2 concertos and the orchestra accidentally started the wrong concerto. We know every competitor now is going to be worried that they're going to be programming the Rhapsody on a theme of Paganini and the orchestra just either starts the wrong piece or in the other concerto, they start the Rhapsody instead. Like, the curse is there. I get it. But I'm personally not as superstitious as a lot of people, so I think you should just program the Rhapsody anyway. Break the curse. Now here, we start seeing a phenomenon that has happened in recent years. Everyone is playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Sonata number 1. I am not a fan of either Rachmaninoff sonatas. And number 1, in its final form, is longer than number 2 in its final form. But I can also see why they are such effective competition vehicles. Now, there is one competitor who is playing Sonata number 1, followed by Sonata number 2 as their entire round. Again, I don't like both of these works, but I have to give kudos to this person for programming both. And I know most people actually like these pieces. So amazing rep choice there, and amazing that you have the chops to be able to pull it off. This is so good for a competition. I just hope that if you win the competition, maybe don't program both of these in the same recital. And we have 5 people playing Rachmaninoff's Sonata number 2. Now this is a nightmare for me. One competitor is even playing the Horowitz edition, which is even longer. I know, not the longest edition. I'll tune in to some of them. I'll tune out of some of the other ones. Rachmaninoff, Gavotte in 6 doubles. This is a very popular piece now, and I understand why. I think it'd be fun to program another dance from the same suite, because if you didn't know, this is actually from a much longer suite of Rameau's. And to perform the entire suite is way too long. But if you include one other piece with the Gavotte, that's fire right there. Ravel, Gaspard de la Nuit. You have to have it. I get it. But 6 is too much. We need to be playing that word game a little bit. Because with Gaspard, there are only a few things you're looking at. You're looking at the opening of Ondine. You're looking at the build-up to the climax. Scarbo, you don't want to make any mistakes. The piece also kind of plays itself after a certain point. And Le Gibet can easily be a dead spot. And like, if you're the only Gaspard, that's a different story. But with 6 Gaspards and you hear Le Gibet over and over again, like, it really becomes the dead spot. Whereas Jodot, it's an interesting choice. I can't even quite picture Jodot in a Cliburn setting. Like, I'm having cognitive dissonance just trying to imagine that. It's a piece for me that's very much like a student type of piece. We could have had some tumbos. Would have loved a tumbo de couperin. You could have even gone weird and done like a minuet d'antique or more la valses. But I get it. La valse is another one of those pieces where you don't want to program too much of, because you could have like 6 la valses. But 1 la valse, this is what we get this year, and I am looking forward to savoring every second of that. We have the miroir, complete miroir, cool. You could do just the boat on the ocean with the Alborada de Grazioso. Just the 2 of them could be a good set as well. We have 1 person playing the left-hand piano concerto. That is very, very exciting. I mean, it's very demanding work. You have to make every second count. Valse Noble e Sentimental, a very, very good set to hear in a recital. In a competition, I'm not sure what it would bring compared to La Valse. Somebody's playing all 6 of Respighi's 6 pieces. I've heard snippets of these, and these are really nice, like Salon Plus. Like they're Salon pieces, but they're way better. We have 3 Scarlatti sonatas only. Sonata in A major, that's one of the ones that starts with a fast upward scale, I think. Excellent. We have a sonata in D minor. I think that's the one with repeated notes. I might be wrong, but any Scarlatti sonata in D minor should be delicious. And then we have a G major sonata, which nothing's coming up in the top of my head, but Scarlatti sonatas, a pair of them would overall be more effective in a competition, but we have 3 singletons this time. Schoenberg, Opus 25. Here's the thing with Schoenberg. I think the early pieces can actually be very effective. The Suite Opus 25 is totally serial, totally serial, but each one of them is a Baroque dance. So if you can bring out the Baroque dance-ness of it, I actually can see the set being an unexpected banger. Schubert, Sonata in E flat. I've listened to this one before. This is an Opus Posthumous one. I found that this piece is a little bit of a drag because a lot of its movements are a bit mid-tempo, but my memory is very fuzzy of it. Wanderer Fantasy, surprisingly a piece that does not get programmed a lot in competitions, but I can understand why, having played the piece. You have to be very considerate about your stamina during this piece, especially in the latter 2 movements. But if you're too concerned, the piece ends up not being explosive and fantastical enough. Somebody is playing all 12 of Schubert's 12 Lieder. That is crazy. I have never considered these 12 to be played in a row, so I'm just looking forward to what this sounds like. I think there's Ave Maria in it. And then one competitor is only playing Du bist die Ruhe, which is one of Schubert's most gorgeous songs. I'm not familiar with the list arrangement of it, so I don't know whether it's a pianistically effective one, because that's a very introverted song. We have somebody playing one piece out of Schubert Liszt Schwanengesang. Love the Schwanengesang. I know the first one, and I know the famous Ständchen. I'm not sure what the Aufenthalt is, but I'm very excited to hear it. 3 people playing Schumann's Davidsbündler Tanz. Davidsbündler Tanz is one of my personal favorite pieces. 3 might be a bit overkill, especially if the judges end up getting to hear all 3 of them. One of them has the Clara Schumann Mazurka beforehand, which is very, very exciting. But you know, it's a big Schumann piece. There's gonna be at least one work that gets a lot of representation. And with this here, I think Davidsbündler Tanz is getting the most representation out of all of the large works. We have 2 Schumann fantasies. The Schumann fantasy is actually a work where most interpretations don't convince me personally. I always want the 3rd movement to go slower. We have 1 person playing Schumann's Humoresque. Love that choice. Humoresque is a super fantastic piece. And you get to play around with whether it's like 1 movement or is it like a multi-movement work but like super chopped up. And now we have Kreisleriana, which is probably as long as the Davidsbündler Tanz, but in my mind, it always seems like a longer piece just because of how long some of the individual movements are. Again, a piece that could have some dead spots, but another one of my personal favorite works. And we have 1 performer playing Schumann's Piano Concerto. We love to hear it. Again, along with the Grieg, we need more representation of these pieces in competitions. Somebody is playing the Presto, Opus 22A. And if you don't know what that piece is, Schumann, in his famous 2nd Sonata in G minor, initially wrote an alternate finale. There's a different Presto movement than the one we got that goes da da do da do da do da do da do da do. You know, that's the famous one. But this Presto is extremely difficult. Like, it's so difficult that even Schumann decided to switch it to something else. So we have somebody playing the alternate finale, and I think in their previous recital they're playing the 2nd sonata. And if anything, the jury can be like, wow, this simple bit of rep selection would make them want to hear this competitor in the next round. So this is genius programming right here. Two people playing Schumann's First Sonata, another piece that seems to be getting very popular these days. I've never had a performance of it really hit me yet, but if there's one place where performances hit, it would be the Cliburn. And then we have the Sonata number 3, which is called like a concerto without orchestra. Is that what it's called? Nickname? I'm not too familiar with it. Back when I had like a Dover edition of the Schumann book, I dabbled with reading some parts of it, and I really enjoyed the snippets that I've seen. It seems like a really effective and symphonic piece of music. Two people playing Waldsingen. Waldsingen's an interesting choice. It's definitely more developed than like the Papillon. I don't see it as like the best choice for a Schumann used for competition. All right, we are in Scriabin territory here. Major Scriabin territory. We have the 2 poems, Opus 32. Love these 2 pieces. They have a surprising amount of contrast. And everybody plays the first one, but when the second one gets paired with it, it becomes a whole new different beast. Somebody's playing all 5 preludes of Opus 74. You know, all 5 of these probably add up to be like 5 or 6 minutes, but they form a really interesting mystical little set. Somebody's playing the first dance of Opus 73. I don't know these, but a late Scriabin is always welcome in my book. We have 5 competitors playing the fantasy Opus 28. Now, this is a piece that, again, has gotten a little too popular for its own good. It is a super effective piece, but we don't need 5 of them. I mean, Scriabin in general has been very popular, so I guess given like how many Sonata number 2s we're about to see, maybe the fantasy does warrant 5 performances. One competitor is playing the first prelude of Opus 9, the 2 left-hand pieces. It's a lovely, melancholic little work. I would have loved to see this being programmed with the Opus 2 etude, the C-sharp minor. That would be a fun little set. We have 2 competitors playing selections from the 24 preludes, Opus 11. I don't know if picking a selection of these is better than picking a sonata, because even compared to Chopin's preludes, these are a lot more, for lack of a better word, impressionistic. They're kind of like just little impressions, and a lot of them don't really make a dent, but that's also why we love Scriabin, right? One person is playing the Insect Sonata. Is it weird to call late Scriabin lovely? Because this is a lovely sonata. Sonata number 2, on the other hand, not the biggest fan of it. First movement by itself is gorgeous. The second movement has never clicked for me, and to have 4 people playing it instead of, say, Sonata number 3, I think it's time this piece kind of takes a step back. Sonata number 3, I do love, so I'm glad there are 2 people playing it. Sonata number 4, every time I see somebody program Sonata number 4, I would just think, why aren't they playing Sonata number 5 instead? Structurally, it is a bit less sophisticated. It is very much Scriabin experimenting with the timbre, but even timbrally, it's a little bit two-dimensional, right? Even with the opening movement of Sonata number 2, I get why so many people pick it, but Sonata number 4 does come out as a bit thin generally. Sonata number 5, one of the greatest piano pieces ever written. I'm glad there are at least 2 people picking that piece. Sonata number 7, I'm not as familiar with. I think that one's the White Mass. Sonata number 9, I've tried listening to it. I know that's the one that Horowitz plays. It has never quite clicked for me, but late Scriabin, again, is always welcome in my book. Valse Opus 38. Okay, this is a very cool piece that I find nobody ever plays it like a waltz. They play it like an indulgent Scriabin piece. If this piece is played more valse-like, it would be easier to understand for the public, and it would provide some new revelations for people who even know it well. Vers la Flamme, great piece. I would still choose a sonata over it, especially Sonata number 5 or any of the late ones, but I'm glad to see it's here. One competitor is playing numerous selections from Shostakovich's 24 Preludes Opus 34, and it looks like they're breaking it into 2 chunks with other music in between. I know selections of this work, and they're pretty effective pieces. 3 competitors are playing the Preludes and Fugues from Opus 87. I'm surprised there's no D flat major, because that's the one that always gets represented, but 2 competitors are playing the last one in D minor. I'm sure that one's like really serious because it's the final work in the set. I'm not familiar with it. And then 1 competitor is playing the B flat major. Glad to see some Shostakovich representation. The first sonata, an explosive piece of music. It takes a very special interpreter for the first sonata to come across as like a cohesive piece of music. So I'm looking forward to hearing it twice. 2 sonatas by Soler, basically the alternative Scarlatti from Spain, I think. Lovely works. Looking forward to hearing the D major and the G minor. And then we have SS, that's Saint-Saëns. 1 competitor is playing the number 6 etude in the form of the waltz. This is a fantastic piece that Isai actually transcribed, I think for piano and violin. And then one person's playing the second concerto, which honestly belongs in the category of like the Schumann and the Grieg. The big thing that the second concerto of Saint-Saëns has is that the opening is so powerful and you can do so much with it. Saint-Saëns Horowitz Dance Macabre. I'm a Dance Macabre purist. I love me the original Dance Macabre. I'm not a big fan of the Liszt version, which I'm quite familiar with. The Horowitz version, I don't know what changes with it, but I can see it being like a Mephisto Waltzian showpiece. This is an interesting one. The Strauss Granger Ramble Rosen. I'm guessing this is based on the Roses from the South Waltz? Or is this a Richard Strauss Rosenkavalier? I think this is a Rosenkavalier. Granger has great piano writing, and Rosenkavalier has great tunes. That's a recipe for success right there. The Stravinsky Agosti Firebird. I would say this is crazy overplayed at this point. The moment people see this work, they're already bunching a competitor to like a certain category. Oh, they're playing this week. But again, that's where the competitor steps up and gives a performance of it that really like rocks the house, rocks the judges. On the other hand, there's only one Petrushka. Kind of crazy. This piece has very much fallen by the wayside temporarily because you know it's going to come back. The biggest problem with this piece, in my opinion, is that the third movement, while being extremely diverse in its palettes of expression, it ends kind of with that Petrushka chord, and I've never found the ending satisfying. So that's why I don't like it when there's like 7 of them in a row. And now we have the Sweelinck variations on Mein Jungs. This is very cool. I know who Sweelinck is. I can't say I recognize this piece. He is one of those like William Byrd type of composers who would write like these old style variations where like the bass line kind of changes and it's like skeletal, but within that skeletal sound, there's a lot of expression. And Sweelinck, I remember, was one of the ones that really surprised me with the quality of his music. So this is super exciting to hear. Yeah, we could have had some Bird and Bull, you know, with that Kit Armstrong album. I was hoping there could be more of that in this competition, but instead we got Sweelinck, which is also very nice. Szymanowski, variations on a Polish theme. I think this is Opus 10. Szymanowski writes for piano very effectively, and variations tend to be very effective. Taniev's Prelude and Fugue in G sharp minor. I recall somebody programming this in past Cliburn competitions. I don't remember what it sounds like. We have Tchaikovsky, 2 pieces, Opus 10. Somebody's only playing the number 1 nocturne. I feel like you should just include the Humoresque number 2 along with it because the Humoresque is such a charming movement that has some fun little octave chord things, and famously Stravinsky arranged it for his ballet The Fairy's Kiss, which also became the Divertimento both for orchestra and for violin and piano. The Humoresque has always had a soft spot in my heart, as does this nocturne. Also inspired Stravinsky for the Divertimento. I would have loved to see somebody perform the theme and variations in F major, number 6, because the only time I ever get to hear it is in the Tchaikovsky competition, even though I think it is one of Tchaikovsky's greatest pieces for the solo piano. But it's nice to get a little bit of Tchaikovsky representation. Of course, we get a ton of Tchaikovsky representation in the Piano Concerto number 1. Yes, 5 competitors playing it, and I totally get why. This piece just does not fail. It has solos galore, it has range. It's just a staple. All right, we have the 5 Bagatelles by Karl Weining, which I know I need to listen to because these have become quite popular pieces. I'm surprised no one has programmed the Sonata number 1. And then, oh boy, we're ending on a really strong note. We have the Liszt arrangement of Wagner's Tannhäuser Overture. This is a fantastic piece of music. You can use it to imitate the brass at the beginning, and then there's like strings that fly up to the top, and just that Wagnerian orchestration, bringing it to the piano and giving the audience something to savor, something to enjoy, something to just walk away home with, recalling fondly. And so yeah, that's the list, and honestly, I'm pretty spent at this point. If there's one conclusion I can make, is that this year, the jury members are really, really looking for competitors with ingenious choices of repertoire. When I was looking through these competitors, there wasn't a single competitor that was doing like a generic repertoire. So I feel like this is something that they actively looked for, and this is going to advance the way piano repertoire gets chosen for, say, the next 10 years, or at least the next 4 years until the next Cliburn, right? But I am extremely looking forward to this competition. I probably won't have time to listen to everything, and who knows if I make another follow-up video of this type. This was just something that I did on a whim, but you know, if this blows up, there might be more. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!